Channel's Week in Review. The terrorist bombing in Jerusalem kills 1 and injures 30. Remembering a tragedy from a century ago, Jewish sports heroes receive their day in the sun, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now on this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. Last week's terrorist bombing in Jerusalem quickly faded from headlines. The bombing at a crowded bus stop killed 1 woman, a 59-year-old Scottish woman studying at Hebrew University, and wounded 30 others. Mary Gardner was a Bible translator who was studying to prepare to translate the Bible into African languages for Christian missionary work on the continent. As of earlier this week, as many as 10 attack victims were still in the hospital, hoping to recover from their injuries, with 2 reported in serious condition. All are currently expected to survive with their injuries. Accompanying this terrorist attack has been a significant rise in the volume and degree of rocket attacks coming out of Hamas-controlled Gaza. The renewed violence from Hamas is seen as a response to the Palestinian Authority's call for new elections, in which Hamas, according to recent opinion polls, would likely lose. Meanwhile, the broader story of unrest in the Middle East is coming closer to Israel, with protests in Syria against the government of Bashar Assad being met with attacks against civilians by government troops. It is currently estimated that Assad's soldiers have killed thousands of Syrian civilians. And while many of the protests in the Middle East, from Egypt to Bahrain, from Tunisia to Syria, are being organized in part through social media like Twitter and Facebook, many in the Jewish community feared that such tools were being used to organize further violence against Israel. The Facebook page Third Palestinian Intifada had drawn nearly 350,000 registered members and called for violence against Israel and Jews. Campaigns in the Jewish community successfully lobbied Facebook to remove the page earlier this week, in accordance with its terms of service disallowing the incitement to violence. Shortly after the page was deleted, others on Facebook initially succeeded in creating copycat pages calling for a third intifada, again drawing thousands of adherents, but it appeared that most such efforts had been quashed by Facebook by Wednesday morning. Meantime, Israel's legislature has passed a new anti-terrorism law that's raising concerns from civil rights groups. The new law from Knesset allows Israel to strip Israelis of their citizenship rights if convicted of terrorism, espionage, or treason. Dual citizens, such as Arab Israelis, would face particularly harsh penalties under the law, which is why the law is drawing criticism, though it passed by a vote of 37 to 11. The bill was introduced by the far-right Yisrael Beitenu party, the party of controversial Israeli Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman. The party proposed the law to fulfill Lieberman's campaign promise of no loyalty, no citizenship, but the law is quite a lot more centrist in nature than Lieberman's campaign platform, calling for the institution of a loyalty oath for Israeli Arabs, which has not gained traction in Knesset. Meantime, the Israel Defense Forces arrested dozens of Palestinians in the village of Hawara in an effort to identify the murderers of 5 members of the Fogel family in the West Bank settlement of Itamar, according to the Palestinian news agency Ma'an. Those arrested were questioned, fingerprinted, and had DNA samples taken. Among them were the town's deputy mayor and 2 of his brothers. Some of the approximately 40 individuals arrested remain in custody, according to Ma'an. Meantime, the investigation of an act of terrorism against Jews outside of Israel could have been held up by a trade deal with Iran. The bombing of a Jewish community center in Argentina in 1994 changed many diaspora Jews' feelings about their safety, and now a news report in Argentina claims that Argentina's foreign minister has offered Iran a deal to quash the investigation into the bombing in exchange for better trade relations. And who is the Argentinian foreign minister in question? Hector Timerman, a man who happens to be Jewish. Timmerman's office has said it won't dignify the report with a response. As it happens, Argentina has been one of the more aggressive critics of Iran on the international scene. Moving on, a different kind of conflagration during the 20th century had a major impact on the Jewish community and jump-started the labor movement here in the United States. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire recently had its 100th anniversary, and Christian Needon was at the location where it all started.
This is the Brown Building, today a part of New York University. But back on March 25, 1911, it was known as the Ash Building, and its top 3 floors, occupied by the Triangle Waste Company, were the site of an afternoon fire that claimed the lives of 146 people, many of them young female Jewish garment workers. That terrible event became a rallying cry for the labor movement over the next 100 years. To mark the 100th anniversary of the event, the Remember the Triangle Fire Coalition was founded by filmmaker and activist Ruth Sergel to bring attention to the workplace legacy of the women and men who perished. And on the eve of planned coalition events, as preparations were taking place at a local union office, Sergel, who is Jewish, explained why the Triangle Fire is an event worth remembering.
I don't think it's even a question of if it's worth commemorating. I think it is being commemorated, and that's the stunning fact. People all over the country from so many different walks of life, Jewish people, Italian-American community, labor, women, immigrant groups, so many people feel personally passionate about this event.
Hundreds of those people turned out en masse early last Friday morning, appropriately at Union Square, to mark the 100th anniversary of the fire with a procession down Broadway. And among the many shirts being held aloft on bamboo poles, there were also placards with images of the young victims in better times, allowing spectators to put a face to the names of working women who died too young.
Most of the women who worked in the Triangle Factory were young, most of them in their teens and early 20s. They were often immigrants who did not have English as their first language. Most of them were Jewish, many were Italian, and shockingly young as there's two of the victims of the fire were 14 years old.
18-year-old Rose Friedman was among the victims, and she received a special recognition Friday afternoon from the teenage female cast of the Wastemakers Opera, who stood across the street from Friedman's former home on East 4th Street to commemorate the young Jewish fire victim with songs and speeches. All of it organized by downtown art head Ryan Gilliam, who explained the ceremony.
We are trying to honor her and remember her and think about what her life was like in our own commemoration, and we've dedicated, some of the girls have dedicated performances to various girls that were in the fire. So that's part of our attempt to keep them in our minds as people with entire lives, not just victims who had this terrible end to their lives.
To see more of the local efforts to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Triangle Fire, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. The owner of basketball's Washington Wizards, a famous lineman for the Super Bowl winning San Francisco 49ers, an Israeli basketball player, and a swimmer were all inducted into the National Jewish Hall of Fame on Sunday. Christian Needon reports.
The 19th class of Jewish sports figures was inducted into the National Jewish Sports Hall of Fame in Comac, Long Island this past Sunday. Yet it was a non-athlete, Stratomatic baseball inventor Hal Richman, who put the importance of athletics within Jewish life in context during his own induction speech.
In the past, Jews in certain circles were stereotyped as not being physically tough or good athletes. This is sheer nonsense.
A sentiment which fellow inductee, San Francisco 49ers offensive lineman and three-time Super Bowl champion Harris Barton said goes way back.
A lot of times people ask me, you're a Jewish football player, and I always tell them, hey, I'm the second greatest Jewish football athlete ever. And everybody says, well, who's the first? Is Andy Koufax? No. That guy David who slew Goliath is who I tell him.
Barton, a two-time All-Pro selection, used much of his speech to pay tribute to his teammate, 49ers tight end and fellow Jewish Sports Hall of Famer John Frank.
John Frank was the man. I remember the first game I played in the pros, we played against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and John Frank caught a touchdown pass in the Pittsburgh end zone in a quiet Three Rivers Stadium. The only thing you could hear was somebody yelling, "Shabbat Shalom, people." And that was John Frank.
To hear more from the 19th incoming class of the National Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. Here's an update to one of the most sensational Jewish stories in years. You might remember the massive arrests in July 2009 of several Orthodox rabbis, various New Jersey elected officials, and others in a case with charges ranging from money laundering to organ trafficking. Well, the chief rabbi of New York Syrian community, Saul Kassan, here seen after his 2009 arrest, has pleaded guilty to money laundering, using his religious charities to filter cash among many recipients. As part of his plea deal, the 79-year-old rabbi is forfeiting more than $350,000 seized by federal agents after his arrest, and Kassan could face up to $250,000 in fines. As part of his plea deal, prosecutors have agreed not to seek a prison sentence, though a judge could impose a sentence of as many as 5 years in jail. One of the more colorful Jewish aspects of the arrest in 2009 was the way that money launderers used the term for a tractate of Talmud to describe $1,000. One of those indicted was recorded saying, I got 50 Gemaras, referring to $50,000. Well, a very different story about the positive attributes of the Talmud is taking place half a world away from New Jersey and Brooklyn. The largest Talmud study in the entire world is being conducted not in any Jewish community, but in South Korea, according to their ambassador to Israel. He's been telling Israeli news agencies that almost every home in the country of 50 million has a Korean translation of the Talmud at home, in an effort to inspire their children to academic achievement, which they believe Jews have been very good at as a result of Talmud study. The ambassador was quoted in Israeli newspaper Yediot Ahronot saying, "Jews study the Talmud at a young age, and it helps them, in our opinion, to develop mental capabilities. This understanding led us to teach our children as well. We believe that if we teach our children Talmud, they will also become geniuses." Since we've all just been shamed into paying more attention to our volumes of Talmud, we'll end the news there and go study. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable: IO Optimum Cable Channel 291, Time Warner Cable Channel 528, RCN Channel 268, Verizon Fios Channel 900, and Cox Cable Channel 1. For more information, visit tjctv.com.